Jonah simply told him, hey, I know what's happening. Toss me overboard.
Okay. And another thing, the thing with Jonah that was interesting, along with what Elder Henry said, he didn't think the Ninevites deserved saving.
That's right.
That's the deep part.
Yeah.
He thought that they had sunk so low that they weren't worthy of God's grace and mercy. And also, along with Jonah, he was a preacher.
That's right.
Could you imagine a preacher saying to his congregation, you all sin too much. I don't want to preach to you about saving you. Come on now. He wasn't just an ordinary man. He was ordained. Well, that's the thing about Jonah that's deep. He was a minister of God.
That's right.
And he had the audacity to say, no, I ain't going.
Well, I heard Pastor Fred Dana say, matter of fact, I was listening to him, he's in Sacramento SDA Church online on YouTube, that Jonah, he was a good preacher, an excellent evangelist. He didn't have a problem preaching to the choir.
Woo!
He loved talking to his own people. He
That's
loved
right.
preaching to his friends and telling them about the goodness of God and what God has done for him and so forth. You know, this man of faith.
Woo!
But when the Lord told him, okay, what did he tell him? You got to go to Nineveh.
Go. Yeah.
Now, he said, oh no, not them. What they did to us, he caught on in his resentments. And when you think about what the Ninevites, the people, did not only to the Babylonians, but to the children of Israel as well. They were slaughtered as well. They were notorious. So it's kind of like what it says in the New Testament, how we're supposed to treat our enemies. Mm-hmm. Without divine intervention, how can we do that? How in the world can we show love and compassion for the people that hate on us?
Well,
because God said to.
He was afraid.
He was.
Yeah.
He was scared.
Oh, yeah, he was afraid.
He was afraid and he was resentful too.
Okay, we got a hand in the audience. Brother John Johnson is back. Good morning, Brother Johnson.
Brother
Good morning.
Johnson.
When I was reading this lesson this week, there was so much about Jonah that actually made me laugh because I see myself so much in this. And actually then this morning I was just thinking, because anybody that knows me know that I actually usually like to think of some analogy to make this present. Mm-hmm. So let's say that God called us and said, Brother Terry Henry, and then mind you, this is actually early 1960s.
Uh-oh.
And then God says, Brother Henry, I want you to go down to Mississippi.
How about that?
Where, you know, that is the seat of the Ku Klux Klan. Brother Henry, I want you to go to such and such town and run this tent meeting for me. And then plus, I want you to also register black people to vote.
Wow.
Knowing that this town is the seat of the Ku Klux Klan that are actually murdering black people left and right. How many of us by actually show of actually hands will say, yes, Lord, send me?
Well, you know, even today.
Waiting.
Okay.
I am actually waiting for someone to raise their hand to say that, yes, Lord, send me.
I would hope, because that's a tough one.
The person that I am today, I would go. If I'm the person that I am today, everything that I've been through, 100%. Because even today, I was just talking to Elder Henry about that. Even today, I don't hesitate to go to the most sordid places, to work with the most so-called sordid people, because God has equipped me to be able to do that. So if the person that I am today, I deal with the racism every day, even the prejudice, even in our own community. So if I am the person that I am today, unequivocally, I would go.
Okay. Anyone else? Because too often when we look at Jonah, we say that no good rascal.
So,
How could he do this? But remember, this place that God was sending him, they was actually notorious for just brutalizing Israelites.
yeah.
And so, too often, we look back and just say, how could these people do such and such and such? But let's bring it home. God has called you to go to the seat of the Ku Klux Klan, run this tent meeting, and then also register black people to vote in the 1960s.
Wow. You know what? I was contemplating that even the other day there while riding home, and my phone was playing a TikTok, and they were talking about different things that racism had caused in this country. And the one story that resonated in my mind was what happened to James Byrd when the three guys offered him a ride, and they drug him till his head and shoulder and arm came off. And it's people like that I said to myself, how on earth? The problem I think we have is not wanting people to hear the gospel. You know, in other words, Jonah probably judged the people by saying they don't need to hear. All of us are sinners. So whether you are at the seat of the Ku Klux Klan or whether you just tell a little white lie, you're still a sinner. And so, like with what happened to Jonah and even Abraham when he pleaded in behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah, we can't make a judgment call and say that they're not worthy to hear the gospel of the good news. So even if we are in the position of the three Hebrew boys and on the verge of being thrown in the fire, God's message knows one thing, and that is to go out. And if it goes out, it's not going to return unto him void. So I can't make that call and say that, be it the three guys that showed no remorse in jail when they were caught in the case of James Byrd, because President Bush was on the president at the time. And I recall all of those things. My point is that I would hope that, be it the 60s or in 2023, that if God says I need somebody, I would hope that I would say, here am I, Lord, send me. Because all of us are sinners. So whether, we do something extremely heinous or just tell a white lie, we still are in need of hearing the good news Jesus saves.
And along with, go ahead, Elder.
I was going to say, just to add a little bit more to it, is like, they say no justice, no peace.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you see a group of people who mistreat another group or an individual, we want justice.
Yeah.
And so, and before we can even accept that group of person or even that individual, we want to see justice first, then we might accept you afterward.
Wow.
But when God is asking you to accept that person before you receive the justice, before that person even asks you for forgiveness, for you to accept that person, give that person a hug, look after that person, that's when you like, man, no, that person doesn't deserve it. But Jonas, he like you said, he might have been put in that situation. Is like, I have to go mingle with these people who didn't ask for forgiveness for all the acts that they've done, but who I have not receiving justice, or my people have not receiving justice for their wrongdoing.
And you know what? As black and brown people, I'm going to just say black people, we have a history. We so kind. We so forgiving.
Yeah.
You know what? And that's a gift that God gave us. I think also what we must remember, not only just about Jonah, the excuses he used to justify And you're talking about justice. I think we're missing two words here too: grace and mercy.
You know,
If we got what we deserved, where would we be? If God has shown you grace and mercy, by the time we get to the point in this lesson, I was just looking back what we've talked about, even last quarter. It was in preparation. When we talked about the Ephesians, going out to people, we're not responsible for the outcome, and talking about God's mission for us. What has God done for you should be the foundation of any missionary work we do, period. And if you're not able to verbalize, articulate, identify anything that God has done for you, well, 100%, you're going to avoid the mission. And sometimes we forget that we forget. Do not forget where you were when God found you.
all right. You know, the thing is, as you look on the screen here, you can see Jonah being thrown in the water. Jonah, even though he was an evangelist and a minister, did he really know God? Did he know God? Because in the story, we'll read the verses here, he told them to throw him off the boat, throw him in the water.
Yeah,
That's attempted suicide.
I believe he knew
Now,
that.
I found this interesting that one commentator said that that's a pagan thought. In other words, okay, I made a mistake and I'm gonna kill myself to appease God. We're not supposed to appease God. The God we serve is not an appeasement God. It's through faith and what you said, grace. And interesting thing too, if you look on the screen, there's a depiction of this man, and you can see a fish, a whale, whatever. He ended up, we know the story. For those of you who don't know, we'll show you the verses and you'll get to it, where a fish swallowed him and took him to Nineveh. You know?
There was a hand in the back, too.
Yeah, go ahead. And then I want to talk about fear.
Jonah, he's no different than any of us. When you say, did he know God?
Okay, make your point, then I'm gonna address that.
Yes,
go ahead.
That Jonah knows him just like we do, partially. Because remember, Jonah main actually reason for not wanting to go, because he says, God, I know you.
Woo!
That you
That's right.
are actually merciful.
That's what he said.
Jonah didn't want them.
Yeah,
Other words,
that's right.
Jonah went James Brown on him. He said, payback. I want some justice.
Yeah.
Get those no good rascals for what they have done to my people.
We will hold
Because, get this,
That's right.
we are no different than him.
That's right.
Because just like Brother
Manel.
said, that, wait up, we want justice first.
You know, I want to address this
That's deep.
knowing God.
That's deep.
One thing that we want to do as a Sabbath school in our Bible study, we want people to get to know Jesus. Now, for example, there's people that know about Jesus, but they don't know Jesus. There's people that know about Abraham Lincoln, studied his autobiography, went to different ceremonies, did history, research on Abraham Lincoln. They know all about him. They know about his Gettysburg Address. They know about his family. They know about his heritage. They know about him. But do they know Abraham Lincoln? No. There's people that know about Jesus. There's people that know about prophecy. Jonah knew about the Lord, knew about him. But when you know the Lord, that's when that trust factor comes in. Now, there's many, you know, John, you had said that all of us know there are some people that Jesus is coming back. They have a personal relationship with the Lord. They know the Lord. They don't just know about him. And decisions are going to be made. There's going to be people that are going to stand for this truth.
So
Okay.
when we're talking about knowing, and we want to move on to fear, Jonah knowing Jesus, and he knew the kind of God he was serving. So he did know Jesus. It's kind of like sometimes he was selfish and self-centered.
That's right.
He thought that he could keep it all to himself.
That's right.
And that's unfortunately how a lot of Christians feel. I don't know if you've ever been in this position before, but if you've strayed away from the Lord, from the church, and you happen to come back, they used to call it backslide. If you've ever backslidden and come back into church, what has been the church family, what has been their response to you? Do they come up and hug you? And,
Some
hey,
do.
How have you been?
Some have.
Or do they look at you like, what you doing here?
Some do that.
I mean, so when we talk about that, that same attitude is here. And knowing Jesus, sanctification is a lifetime. You think you know, but it's an ongoing thing. He never ceases to amaze me because his thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are not our ways. So knowing Jesus is one day at a time.
That's right.
Depending upon your relationship with him, an intimate relationship. We don't know everything about Jesus. We don't know everything about God.
There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, you're going to be smiling, you're going to be sad, there's going to be, it's like a bipolar type of experience. But there's people that know the Lord. Let's go right quick here. We're going to go into Sunday.
Everything and run.
Sunday is entitled,
No.
What's Sunday's entitled?
Fear.
Our excuses, fear.
Yeah.
Monday, our excuses, false views.
False views.
Ooh. I'm just going to go Tuesday, inconvenience. Don't you find it interesting that all these are negatives here? Wednesday, uncomfortable confrontations.
Ooh.
And Thursday, here am I, send me, coming from the actual memory verse. So we're going to Sunday. Now, in Nahum chapter 1, verse 1, and Nahum 3, verses 1 through 4, and 2 Kings, we're not going to read all these verses. I'm just going to start doing the first couple there. What do these verses reveal about Nineveh and the relationship between Assyria and Israel? How might this relationship have impacted Jonah's decision to go to Tarshish instead? Now, we've pretty much been talking about this experience. This is Nahum 1:1. It says, let's read this together. What does it say? The burden of Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Echoshite. I think that's how you pronounce that. And there's the Nahum verses 1 through 4. Again, this is concerning Nineveh. Woe to the bloody city. It is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departed not. The noise of a whip and the noise of a rattling of the wheels and of the prancing horses and of the jumping chariots. The horsemen lifted up both the bright sword and the glittering spear. And there is a multitude of slain. And this is what they did, the Assyrians did to their enemies. And a great number of carcasses. And there is none of their per corpse. They stumble upon their corpse. They had so many on the road, they were tripping over them. Because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts, and selleth nations through her whoredoms, and families through her witchcrafts. That's Nineveh. That's what he knew what that was about when it came to going to talk to folks in that city. Fear is something that every human being, most of us, the Lord has given us this emotion. And for example, if a tiger was to come into this sanctuary, or it doesn't have to be in a sanctuary, I'm going to be scared. I'm not going to sit there, well, I'm not worried. I'm going to walk up and pet the kitty cat. No, fear is something. And I'm going to share this something, Brother Henry. I heard this and it made me think. And, you know, Brother Johnson had been talking about fear and how it affects all of us. There was an incident that happened worldwide that was based on fear. And we know John said that Jonah could be any of us. Well, look, there were churches that closed down. There were missions that stopped. Bars didn't close.
COVID.
Now, I'm not throwing out the whatever, just, you know, something to think about. Not to get into that discussion about, because obviously there was a problem. But the fear factor was so enhanced to the point where it practically almost, well, it did shut down some missions in some churches. So this fear thing is serious. Sister Wiley, you had something to say.
So courage is fear that has said its prayers. Okay.
Repeat that again. Say that again. Say that again. Put the mic a little closer so everybody in the world can hear.
Courage is fear that has said its prayers. So it is.
A lot of folks are smiling and agreeing and shaking their head.
Because
yes.
if you think about what that is, really, we all have feelings, thoughts, and emotions about things. And so then at the bottom of Sunday's lessons, to me, what summarized Sunday's lessons, what we fail to realize is that we can do the same thing. Allow ourselves to be controlled by our fears rather than God. Not just by fear, but other emotions. Anxiety, depression, resentment. Our feelings get us into trouble. Our thoughts are twisted. We talked about that. So even before Jonah had that feeling, he already had it in his made up mind, they don't deserve. So what I like about studying in the lessons, it points the finger back to me, Latanya, and how I can relate to this. And for me, absolutely 100%. So you can experience fear, but still do the next right thing.
I want to say good morning on the chat here. You have Sister Mary Warda. Good morning to Sister. Happy Sabbath to Sister Mary Warda, and to Shalonda Bass, Sister Shalonda Bass. She says, "Happy Sabbath. Good morning. Blessings." This is something that's taken in the lesson. This is from the Prophets and Kings. This is about Nineveh. Among the cities of the ancient world, in the days of divided Israel, one of the greatest was Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian realm. In the time of its temporal prosperity, Nineveh was a center of crime and wickedness. Inspiration has characterized it as the bloody city, full of lies and robbery. We just read that in Nahum. In figurative language, the prophet Nahum compared the Ninevites to a cruel, ravenous lion. And this is taken from Nahum chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "Upon whom he inquired, hath not thy wickedness passed continually?" So, he had a right. Now, if you look on screen here, these are some archaeological findings of the Nineveh, of the Assyrian Empire. Nineveh was the capital, and they were vicious. They would take their victims or their enemies, and they would just torture them, skin them alive. They would behead them. They would impale them. Impaling is when they have a sharp object, and they just force the body just to penetrate their body in pain. Pastor Fred Dana talked about not only did they feed them to the lions and so forth alive, but what they would do, they'd have a chain gang. And if they had a group of enemies, they would take a hook, and they would put hooks along that rope. And the hook, they would force that hook under the rib cage. And then they would have just long lines of prisoners walking. And that hook would be connected to their rib cage, which is connected to that rope. And, you can imagine the pain that was trying to just keep that hook from pulling your ribs out and so forth. They were vicious people. Jonah was aware of these people. Now, when we talk about fear, Sister Wiley, could you read the YouTube comment on the bottom of Sunday there? And we have it on the screen.
Think back a time when you felt strongly that God was directing you to do something that you, out of fear, really didn't want to do. What lessons have you learned from that experience? The most recent experience I can tell you was
Mike,
after
a little closer.
I'm close. I think
Okay,
the mic
go
needs
ahead.
to be up. The thing that I can remember in my memory was coming back to the body of Christ. Now, I have been sober and in recovery for a while. 15 years, 16 years. And my fear was coming back to church. I knew God was directing me because I was heavily involved in AA and CA, but I wasn't getting what I needed because we didn't really talk about Jesus. I wasn't really relating to the people there. I began to grow in a different way. So I know God was leading me, and he used people in this church, women in this church, that kept calling me, talking to me, and inviting me to come. So I came to church one Sabbath. It was Women's Day. Sister Terry Perkins and Sister Sheila Love, they prayed for me, and they was on me, and I promise you, the first of the year, I got baptized, and I never let go. For me, that's the example. When I know that God was leading me, and I had to face my fear because I was one of them people that I done been gone so long. People gonna be talking about me, looking at me. And they probably were, but I'm not coming here for the people. I love Jesus because he loves me. So anybody that's having a quandary, oh, I can't come to church because people looking and talking about you out in the street. You're posting stuff on Facebook and you're wondering why they're talking about you. Come on now. I'm here. I'm covered. Because what God ordains, he will maintain. I ain't let nobody run me up out of nowhere. Even though I feel and think something, that's all within me. See, you don't have the power to cause me to think or feel anything. It's all what's in me. And if I'm feeding on the word and being around people that are going to help to lift me up, that's what I need, because I'm not an island. So for me, he knew what he was doing. He asked that question. Turned into blessings for self and others. Think about that. So, yeah.
And I'm really glad that that we're talking about fear, because fear can paralyze you.
It sure can.
Just imagine how many of us have not started a business that God has laid upon our actually heart, because we've been afraid of I might fail, and then let's actually throw this in too, that the opposite. There can actually be this fear of actually success.
That's right.
Because when you are actually successful, you have more people depending on you. And then you have more responsibility and accountability. So fear can be paralyzing.
Fear, and when you said people counting on you, also the onus is on you, and also people ridiculing you, judging you like that. And we just really have to practice and condition ourselves to get past that. And Pastor said the way we practice is the way we play. So if you in the game, you going to get judged. You got, and I've said it before, if you on the Lord's team, you got to be willing to take a hit. If you ain't willing to take a hit, you better get off the field. Because you got to be willing to take it on the chin sometime, so to speak, for the Lord.
You know what, I wanted to look at what was the difference between the two audiences, the audience that Lot faced and the audience that Jonah faced.
I'm glad you brought that up.
When, why was the outcome different?
Brother Henry, can I jump in real quick? I
Sure,
want you to respond to this.
That's
Why
good.
did the Lord have Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed, but did not have Nineveh destroyed?
God
Go ahead,
knew what
Brother
was in
Henry.
their hearts.
I think you were flowing with that.
I was thinking about the attitude that Jonah had regarding people that come back, as you elaborated, and then when I think about the disciples, when Paul joined the team, they were like, in their mind, can I trust you coming back into the fold? And so we have to leave that with God.
Yeah.
But for the grace of God, there go I. So who am I to decide who should come back or who should not hear the good news, the gospel? Because
Lord.
earlier when I saw the infant come in here, when you talk about knowing Jesus and not really knowing the extent that he would go, an infant is worthy of death because of sin. The dude that had killed all those people, the son of Sam, or whatever they call the guy's name, who killed
Back
all
in the
those.
1970s, son of
Yeah.
Sam that was killing people. in
Worthy
New York
of
City.
death. But what we have to look at is when we see the infant or we see the son of Sam, we have to see Jesus on that cross. The death that he got was we are deserving of. And had he not gone to the cross, be it the Klan or be it somebody that just tells a white lie,
Right.
you're worthy of death. So the extent that Jesus went to save someone that would tell a little white lie or someone that is a mass murderer, because of what he did on the cross, we can be saved. And with that opportunity Because the scripture says the grace of God has appeared unto who? Just those folk here, right?
You know,
All men.
Sodom and Gomorrah, along with the antediluvian age during the time of Noah, they had gone beyond reproach.
Yes.
There was no
Yeah.
turning back for Sodom and Gomorrah and the antediluvian age. And sin is what the Lord allowed their sin to just destroy them. It was different. It was different with Nineveh. Nineveh, even though they were corrupt, even though they were evil, even though they tortured people, and there were still people in the city that loved God.
Yes.
And
yes.
they were waiting, and you have to think about it. The
And-
people of Nineveh, it seems like that they were just waiting for someone to come with a solution or answer or hope. Because we're talking about
That's
mission.
right.
We were talking about mission. So when we're going out to people that have already maybe been praying, because see, in case you don't know, you can be practicing self-defeating behaviors, whatever that is, and be praying to God for a solution and a way out. So if you praying for a relief, for redemption, and then someone that's on mission and comes, then that's it, you ready. That's confirmation. Have you ever prayed to God for something and he came through? You think that was because of you? Nothing to do with
You
you.
know, and when you talk about people praying for something to happen,
That's good news.
they've got to want to make that choice. You know, somebody was talking about this, and I read this too, that some of us, as human beings, not just us, but as human beings, we have the tendency to, some people look at, okay, God, you have the power to change me, but I don't want to change. I want you to use that power to force me to stop doing what I'm doing. It has to be, as Sister Riley mentioned, it has to be that trust and that faith factor involved. And we'll see, like with Jonah here. I keep getting him mixed up with Noah. Now on the screen here, you can see when the storm came, Jonah blamed himself. We're going to go to scriptures. We've pretty much been talking about this, but for those of you that aren't familiar with this story, we're going to look right into scriptures here. This is Jonah chapter 3. Jonah chapter 1. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me. Now this is the whole city, okay? But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. And so he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Now this is the man that was preaching about the Lord. Now he's running from him. But the Lord sent out a great wind into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was like to be broken. Then the mariners were afraid, and cried every man unto his God, and cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea, to lighten it of them. But Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. So the shipmaster came to him and said to him, What meanest thou, O sleeper? Arise, call upon thy God, if so be that God will think upon us, that we perish not. Now here's a person that is not part of God's people, and he's telling this man of God, call on your God. Verse 7, and they said every one of his fellow, Come, and let us cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this evil is upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell upon Jonah. Then said they unto him, Tell us, we pray thee, for whose cause this evil is upon us? What is thine occupation, and whence thou comest? What is thy country, and of what people art thou? See, they're blaming him. Evidently, he's the cause of this. And he said unto them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, which had made the sea and the dry land. Then were the men exceedingly afraid, and said unto him, Why hast thou done this? For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Then said they unto him, What shall we do unto thee, that the sea may be calm unto us? For the sea wrought and was tempestuous. And he said unto them, Take me up, and cast me forth into the sea, so that the sea be calm unto you. For I know that for my sake this great tempest is upon you.
You know what? I'm mulling over this because this is apropos and germane to the subject. And as I recapitulate, I think about the fact that there was you made a statement about what the Lord was doing. Mm-hmm. There's a conversation that Lucifer had with the Lord, and he said skin for skin. Does God control everything? Does he control our rebellion, or does he control our acceptance? Because if you think about this, when what you just read, it said that God caused a wind to go out, and it caused the boat to become
rocky,
exactly
unsteady. Mm-hmm.
Now, when Jesus was in the boat, there was a storm that came down.
And those were fishermen. They were used to storms.
My point is, whether we accept it or we reject it, who ultimately is in control of our will?
God knows the impact. God knows the result, but each of us have free will, and he allows our free will to come into fruition.
Question.
So, Elder Henry, God is still sovereign, whether you believe in him or not. He is still God, because the lesson pointed that out, that he's sovereign wherever you go, where, even, he's still, even if you don't believe. John, I'm sorry.
When Kevin was reading this, this just jumped out to me. Jonah knew that God was so merciful that, remember, these fishermen, they're panicking because there's this horrible storm. They actually think that they're getting ready to die. Jonah knows God is so merciful that even though he's disobedient, he is sleeping. Think about that. He knows that God is so merciful that even though I'm out here running the streets,
how about that?
I can actually go to bed without sleeping. Even though I know I'm being disobedient to God, he knows that God is so merciful that this rascal is able to sleep in the ship when he has abandoned the mission. You talking about grace?
Right.
Yes.
Well,
Ooh,
that's presumption. That's presumption right there with what you're saying. Jonah's heart was so turned to the sovereign of the earth and sea, and so he confessed that he would say, it's like what you just said. He knew that God was in control. Is that insane for us sometimes to think we gonna make it back? Right. So at the bottom paragraph, you guys, it says our focus should be on how we can bring God's blessings and hope to those in need. Another misunderstanding stops us from accepting God's call and mission is believing that success depends upon ourselves. We're not responsible for the outcome. We can no more save a soul than Jonah could save Nineveh. We can have a savior mentality about mission. Our call is not to do the saving, but to cooperate with God in his saving work. I just want to finish these sentences. We give testimony, praising God for specific ways he is changing us, but only God can draw people to himself. We can plant seeds of truth, but only God can convert the heart. We often confuse our role with God's, which is enough to make anyone find an excuse not to witness. Yes, God used Jonah, but only God, not Jonah, turned Nineveh around.
So, in response to what you just read, and I won't hold you long, I can't tell you how sick and tired of funerals that I'm tired of going to, but they're going to continue to happen. So when we see our family members gather at funerals, and afterwards you have the meal, and folks want to down some of that stuff, comfort, Should we write them off, or should we, because you just read something and it said something about, basically Jonah's heart was turned to the sovereign of the earth. And so he confessed and was saved. What about those that we think we can write off? Because I look at family members that sat in a funeral and they mourn and they cry, and right afterwards we want to feel the spirits, and so we consume. I was sitting at a funeral a year or so ago, family member, and after all the mourning and the pastor spoke eloquently, there was a bottle on the table bigger than me that they were going to, and I was saying to myself, wow, did they get the point? But my point is this: they can be saved. And so we should continuously strive to try to reach loved ones, just like Jonah hopped in the boat fast asleep, and yet Nineveh turned around.
It's attraction and not promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the body of Christ, we want to promote things. What does not come from the heart cannot reach the heart. So that person at the funeral that's there with that bottle of alcohol, guess what? Since we serve a sovereign God, he can change that person. Amen. As opposed to the other person that been sitting in the pew, taking it all in for years and years and years. See, Jesus wants people that know that they're wretched, know that they're woefully inadequate, knowing that they're a sinner. Yes. He ain't coming to them people that think they got it going on and they okay, and that's eloquent speeches. He ain't talking about y'all. He talking about the least of these, because that's who he hung with. He didn't hang with all these other people. So when we talk about that person with the bottle, that person with the bottle could be up in the pulpit.
Amen.
You don't know, preaching and have a better relationship with Christ than you ever could, because Christ was with